2024 NFL draft just ended, but draft season and mock draft season is 365 days a year here on this channel. So make sure you're subscribed because this is my way too early 2025 mock draft. As I say every year, this is more about getting to know some of the players for you guys and less about exactly which player goes to which team. Many of you get that, and it's a lot of projection because we don't know who's going to get re-signed, who's going to get signed in free agency, who's going to retire, who's going to drop off and play, whose fifth-year option is going to get picked up, and it goes on and on and on. But here are some initial things to know about this class. It is better than 2024 and deeper significantly. 2024 was really weird. It's like the last year, the COVID year, so you have different players coming back, and the talented players may have gone back to school in a lot of different scenarios, and a lot of this is projection. So it's way better defensively. If you look at 2024, it is wide receivers, offensive tackles, and some quarterbacks there at the top. That's pretty much it. In this draft, edge is way better. Interior defensive line's way better. Corner is way better. Safety's way better. It is running back is. Tight end's better. Quarterback is not. So, of course, guys are going to come out of nowhere. Guys are going to have big seasons. You have a bunch of fringe QBs right now, in my opinion, because like Cam Ward could have a killer season from Miami, where he transferred now. Noah Fafita is undersized. That's just going to hurt his projection. It's going to be tough for a 5'10", 5'11" quarterback to go in round one. It just is. Jackson Dart could have a big year for Ole Miss. What does that do for his stock? Riley Leonard transfers to Notre Dame. There's a lot of potential here. Can we see him stay healthy and productive? He's a good athlete with a good arm. He could be productive for Notre Dame. That could push him into the first round. Dylan Gabriel, another undersized guy. I just don't think he's going to end up going very high. I would say think like Jordan Travis type projection with him. So somewhere early day 3 maybes where he goes off the board. Connor Wigman could end up developing. Drew Aller's got a ton of potential. We just really didn't see a lot of it last year for Penn State. But he could have a big year and end up going in the first round. That's a possibility. If Jalen Milroe gets more consistent, he's a really great athlete, really great deep ball. He could have a Jaden Daniels type season, which sounds crazy to say. Obviously, that'd be incredible. But he could have that same type of rise, right? Milroe is very talented, very athletic, and a great deep ball, but really raw in a lot of other areas. Quinn Ewers obviously has incredible potential. He was one of the highest rated quarterback prospects or recruits of all time. As a Texas fan, we just really haven't seen it yet. He hasn't been consistent. He played a dominant quarter against Alabama 2 years ago. I've kind of been holding on to that. But outside of that, Quinn Ewers has been up and down. Accuracy downfield has been spotty. Based off his 2023 film, he is not even close to a first-round pick. So we'll see what happens. But he could have a huge 2024, a lot of weapons. We just need to see it with Quinn Ewers. Shadur Sanders, got to see more as well. He needs to be more consistent and play better throughout the year, but that offensive line makes it difficult. Carson Beck, for me, is the best quarterback in the class right now. I completely agree with the PFF rankings. He was really good last year. If he declared this year for 2024, there's a chance he's a first-round pick. QB4, QB5, QB6. He might have been going to the Denver Broncos as opposed to Bo Nix. That's a possibility. Carson Beck was actually very good last year. So we'll have to see what happens with QB, but I do not have a QB going number 1 overall. I do also happen to agree with PFF at this point. I have James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. I tweeted out, kind of joking around like, oh, everyone's so excited for the 2024 NFL draft when James Pierce Jr. isn't even draft eligible yet. He is 6'5", 240 with exceptional explosiveness. He is a pure speed rusher. And of course, if the Panthers are back at number 1 overall, we may see a team trade up for a QB. We may see them take a QB, depending on who's there, what happens with Bryce Young. But if they're picking number 1 overall, you never know what's going to happen. But James Pierce, super explosive athlete. We know the Panthers are desperately in need of edge help, especially after trading Brian Burns to the Giants. You lose Yetur Gross-Matos. You lose Frankie Louvu, who's kind of the hybrid linebacker edge player. But they desperately need help off the edge. I think they brought back Jadeveon Clowney to the Carolinas, of course, former Gamecock. But James Pierce Jr. is in the conversation, I think, to be the first player off the board. This defensive class is way better than what we've seen in the past year or two. At number 2 overall, I have the New England Patriots, and I think they're going to continue to develop and build around Drake May. And I think Will Campbell from LSU is going to help you do that. He's definitely in play to be the first tackle off the board. If you look at the tackle class, Kelvin Banks Jr. is an exceptional player. Mauler in the run game, great in pass pro. He will be a first-round pick. I think he ends up going top 10, and you'll see that in a minute. For me, Kelvin Banks could be the first tackle off the board very easily. And then I look at Emory Jones from LSU. When watching Jaden Daniels, he was another guy that really popped, even almost more so than Will Campbell. Campbell's just so refined. Emory Jones is the really great athlete, and we'll see what that ends up doing. And of course, we got another season to play. If Emory Jones has a better 2024 than Will Campbell, he will be the first off the board. Maybe a higher ceiling there with Emory Jones. Not to be confused with quarterback Emory Jones. This is a different spelling and a totally different player. And he is a very good one. But Will Campbell, for right now, I think will be the first tackle off the board. It's so close. We might see some risers. Josh Connerly is quite good from Oregon. A Johnny Cornelius as well. But Will Campbell, for me, is the second pick of the draft right now. As we get to the Broncos at 3. This was an interesting one because I really did consider receiver. Luther Burden is a great player. Super explosive. Probably best from the slot, but I think can play the Z. Really, really fun receiver prospect. We'll see if he ends up, being a true X-type player. He doesn't have super elite size at 5'11", but we've seen guys of that size be X-style receivers in the NFL. Burden certainly very athletic and definitely athletic enough. He was a monster from Mizzou. But for the third pick, I'm going to go Mykel Williams from Georgia. Now, he was someone that was particularly impressive to me. Again, I think of you remember a couple of years ago where the Jags were picking at number 1 and took Trayvon Walker? Mykel Williams, I think, could have a similar type rise this season. He is a monster athlete with phenomenal size, is scheme versatile, and for me, I think to the Broncos is a great fit. It's a perfect fit for their defense. He can potentially slide inside the way Trayvon Walker did, but also be your base rush edge player. He's a really, really good, really fun player. And again, another just height, weight, speed type freak. And could even be in play for number 1, right? We'll see what the 2024 season ends up looking like. At number 4, I am getting Kelvin Banks Jr. off the board from Texas. Yes, you took J.C. Latham at number 7 overall this year. Tackle is still a bit of a mess. And if you're picking at number 4, Kelvin Banks Jr. could certainly be in the mix. Also, quarterback, I suppose, just because if you're picking at 4, quarterback Will Levis probably didn't perform all that well for you. But you need to continue to invest in the offensive line. I don't think receiver is as bad as everybody thinks. If Treylon Burks continues to not be so good, receiver absolutely in play. DeAndre Hopkins getting older, but you brought in Calvin Ridley. I don't think it's a huge need when you can get a cornerstone tackle in the mix, and that would let Kelvin Banks Jr. play left tackle and Latham go to a more natural right tackle, even though he's expected to play left tackle in 2024. At 5, we have the New York Giants. Now, it's so funny. The Giants take Malik Neighbors at 6, and everyone's like, who's going to throw to him? I don't really know that J.J. McCarthy or any of these rookie quarterbacks really are going to come into the NFL and be as good as Daniel Jones or significantly better. I think McCarthy's got a great chance to outproduce Daniel Jones because of the situation, and I don't think Daniel Jones is good. Please do not misconstrue what I'm saying. I said that I didn't like him as a prospect. I didn't think he was as good as his production showed in his second year. I'm not a big Daniel Jones guy, but at the same time, just drafting a quarterback for the sake of drafting a QB to throw him in the same situation that Daniel Jones has been in, that's not conducive to success for any young quarterback. So I think the Giants made the right move with going with Malik Neighbors, get a wide receiver 1 in an offense, and build around so that when you do have a chance to draft a QB, you can get a good one and throw him into a good situation, quite like the way the Vikings did, or the Bears did this year in 2024. I think those guys are going to end up being very solid as rookies because the situation is so good. You can't say the same about a guy like Drake May, for example, going to the Patriots. But at 5, I think the Giants could absolutely consider a quarterback, and it might end up being early, but for right now, Carson Beck is QB1 in the class for me based off the 2023 film. He was more consistent than Shadur Sanders. He was a really, really good player for Georgia, and I feel like most people don't talk about him, and it's so confusing. Maybe people just attribute it to a great defense, right? Oh, that's why Georgia's winning games. They think Carson Beck is like Stetson Bennett. He's not. This is an NFL quarterback prospect, the way Stetson Bennett really was just going to be a backup. Carson Beck could absolutely be the first quarterback off the board. Now, it wouldn't surprise me to see Shadur Sanders or even Quinn Ewers, Drew Aller, right? Some of the guys we talked about earlier. 2024 is going to mean a lot to these guys, but right now, Carson Beck is my QB1. And again, Riley Leonard, Jackson Dart, Cam Ward, maybe in those conversations as well. Cam Ward would need to really have a very impressive 2024, but, you know, I'm a little bit skeptical with that situation down in Miami. At number 6, we have the Commanders, and I am going to go with cornerback Will Johnson from Michigan. He is a phenomenal player. He would have been CB1 in this class very easily. I think he will end up being a top 10 pick. You look at Will Johnson, and it's just great height, prototype type cornerback, right, with very good speed. He's physical. He's locked down in coverage. He is a really, really good player and would be a great pick for any team taking him in the top 10. Cardinals at number 7. Here I am going to go with Luther Burden, and I think he'd be a tremendous combo with Marvin Harrison Jr. You also look at Michael Wilson in the mix. Of course, no more Rondale Moore, no more Hollywood Brown. The receiver room still isn't great, even with the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr. Burden and Harrison Jr. could be an incredible combo. You get the refinement and still the good size and athleticism of Marvin Harrison Jr. with the electric speed and playmaking ability of Luther Burden. Super fun player. He could operate in the slot or the Z, and then you could have Harrison Jr. be your prototypical X. You know, you could have Michael Wilson also play on the outside, Burden in the slot. Could be a really, really fun group of receivers there in Arizona. Vikings at number 8. I think this is a player that could go earlier. It's Mason Graham from Michigan. He could absolutely end up being a top 5 pick. The Michigan defensive line was amazing this past season, and Chris Jenkins, who ended up being a top 50 pick, was not the best among them. It was absolutely Mason Graham, and you could even make a really good argument for Kenneth Grant from Michigan as well. But Graham has great size, tremendous explosiveness. He's a really, really good player. And again, I feel almost bad getting him off the board at number 8 right now because we know the league is valuing these interior defensive linemen more and more and more. He is right now about the best one in the class. Dayon Walker is one we're going to talk about in a minute, who is a freak type player. It wouldn't shock me to see him end up going top 10. Again, we'll talk about him in a minute. But this is a really good interior defensive line class. Just Dante Corleone is a good player. Walter Nolan was the former number 1 recruit in his class. I have concerns about him being a first-round pick. He keeps bouncing around from school to school. I think he was at 4 or 5 different high schools. There's just some weird stuff going on with Walter Nolan, and the talent is undeniable and unbelievable. We'll see what he looks like in 2024. I think he transferred to Ole Miss. Nas Stackhouse was draft eligible this year, ends up going back to school. He could have ended up being a top 100 selection. Alfred Collins has always had big potential for Texas, but hasn't really put it all together. Bear Alexander was a Georgia guy that ended up going to USC. He's had some weird stuff going on as well. Tyleik Williams, I could see end up getting in the first round. Howard Cross, son of former Giant legend, tight end Howard Cross. So you got some really, really good interior defensive linemen in the mix. We might see quite a few of those guys go in round 1, especially with the way interior defensive lineman is being valued right now by the NFL, and it's the quickest path to the quarterback, right? Right up the middle. If you can have dominant interior pressure, you're going to have a pretty good defensive line. Everyone wants the next Aaron Donald, obviously. You can't do that. But you can shoot for the next Chris Jones or Dexter Lawrence or Quinnen Williams, or name any of these great interior defensive linemen. Justin Madubuike, you know, right? Christian Wilkins. There's so many that are getting paid, and for good reason. At number 9, we have the Las Vegas Raiders, and I am going to get Shadur Sanders off the board. I don't know where he's going to end up going. He could end up falling out of the first round. He's got to be more consistent in 2024, but the talent is, again, undeniable with him. He could end up easily being a first-round pick. I know he's the betting favorite to be the first player off the board right now in 2025. I don't know if I see that happening, but it absolutely could. He is, again, incredibly talented in a down quarterback year. We'll have to see what happens, but the Raiders just really could use quarterback. They completely ignored it in 2024. I don't hate that. But you might really need to go QB in 2025, depending on if you think Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell is the guy for you, and I highly doubt that. Seahawks at number 10. I'm going with one of my draft favorites, and that is Abdul Carter from Penn State. I know Abdul Carter has had some off-the-field stuff recently, but it doesn't seem like anything majorly concerning if you look into it. Yeah, it's not ideal. Some type of misdemeanor assault and battery of a tow truck driver. That doesn't sound great on the surface. Everybody makes mistakes. Look, back when you or I were, 20 years old, who was not assaulting a tow truck driver. We all got into stuff, right? But Abdul Carter is the next in line of these Penn State linebackers slash edge rushers. He's going to be a full-time edge rusher for Penn State in 2024, and he is a freak. He really pops when you watch Penn State, 6'3", 250, with exceptional athleticism. He's great off the ball, but could be even better as a true edge. Has the size. I put out a tweet, and it's not to disparage Harold Perkins, but Abdul Carter is what people think Harold Perkins is or could be, and LSU fans were actually really receptive of that, so maybe I want to walk that back. LSU fans might know exactly what Harold Perkins is, which is too light, too small to be a dominant edge rusher at 6'1", 220, but can he play as an off-ball linebacker? We'll have to see. That's his best role for the NFL. I think he's going to be doing more of that in 2024. The athleticism, again, the talent, as I keep saying, undeniable for these guys, but what is their 2024 season going to look like? Anyway, I'm going Abdul Carter here. I think the versatility makes him extremely valuable, and adding juice into that front seven could be super, super fun for the Seattle Seahawks. I'm a big Abdul Carter guy. He's just a monster playmaker, and I think, again, when you have that type of talent, these are the type of guys that end up going high in the draft. It's tough to get these technicians in there over the big-time athletes because typically we just see the really good athletes who are also pretty good, technically, get drafted highly. And that's why I'm so, confused about where to put JT Tuimoloau, because he's not some exceptional athlete, but he's good enough, I think. He's not Leatu Latu as a player, but he's a powerful edge rusher that I think will be a solid player. I think he's somewhere in between Leatu Latu and Braylon Trice as a player, which to me is like back end of the first round, second round type guy. I think other players are end up rising more than him, like maybe even Jack Sawyer, who was draft eligible. He could have been a first round pick this year. We'll see what his 2024 looks like, but with this exercise, it's a lot about getting those really good athletes off the board. As we get to the Saints at 11, I think you continue to invest in the offensive line. Ryan Ramczyk cannot be counted on long term. Obviously, tackle still a big issue. I like the addition of Talisa Fuanga from Oregon State, but I think you could keep Emory Jones in state here from LSU. He's athletic enough to where I think you could move him over to that left side, and you continue to invest in the offensive line. That's what a lot of the good teams do, and that's why your quarterback has time. And obviously, with the protection, you're able to throw to receivers. It's an impossible task to ask any DB to cover down the field for 4 or 5 seconds. And you might have that type of time on occasion if you have a really elite offensive line. It's a tough ask, but I think you continue to build in the trenches if you are the Saints. At number 12, at the Tampa Bay Bucks, and I'm going to go Travis Hunter, corner from Colorado, and he is a cornerback to me. Yes, he's a guy that can make plays on offense, but that's just because he's an incredible athlete. That's what it really comes down to for Travis Hunter. He is a great playmaker on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that will be what his NFL position ends up being. Now, that's not to say that he won't get offensive snaps, because I think that's a legitimate possibility wherever he goes, or return kicks, or just finding a way to get that guy the football is a recipe for success. But I think his best NFL role is as a CB1 type guy. He's instinctive, he is freakishly competitive and athletic, and that's a recipe for success again. He is a great player, and I think the Bucs could absolutely look to get a cornerback in the mix, and Travis Hunter is somebody that could end up going inside the top 10. Really, really great player. Colts at 13, we go Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, keeping him in state. It's what I did last year with Joe Alt to the Colts when they were projected to pick at number 5. Benjamin Morrison's really good, though, and I think he's going to check off a lot of boxes for Chris Ballard, GM of the Colts, because he has size and athleticism. Prototypical CB1 type player, really, really good for Notre Dame. And the Colts need to address their secondary more than they had in 2024. Benjamin Morrison has potential to come in and be the best cornerback in that group within a couple of years. So he is a really, really talented prospect. And again, this defensive group is really good. Now, there are a couple of, I would say, like question marks right now. Jabbar Muhammad's tape has been pretty good, but does he have first round type size when you're doing a way too early mock draft when he's only 5'10", 180 pounds? Decario Davis, complete opposite end of the spectrum. He is 6'4", 185 pounds, with very good speed, freak athlete. I think he ends up getting into the first round. just because the size and speed profile is so good. But what other cornerbacks get in the mix here? I would certainly doubt Denver Harris. He has so many off the field things as well. And that Texas A&M group, and that's where he was, they did a bunch of them just kept getting in trouble. It was super weird. But anyway, the cornerback class is great. And look at safety. Malachi Starks is a phenomenal player, but where do you draft the first safety? Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State, another really, really good player. How many safeties get in round one if anybody does? So there are a lot of big questions here. Rod Moore is a good player. He was draft eligible in 2024, ended up going back to school. What happens with him? So there are, a lot of questions here about these guys, but the talent for a lot of them is not questionable. A bunch of really, really good players. Steelers at 14. This was a tough one for me because do you continue the Russell Wilson thing or extend Justin Fields? None of those guys have any long-term security at all. And for that reason, I'm setting up a quarterback pick. And I'm going to go Quinn Ewers from Texas. I had him in this range last year. Again, ended up going back to school. It's such a tough projection because the talent is there. We just really haven't seen him really dominate yet. And maybe that happens in 2024 with Texas. I just think the offense is in such a state that I don't know that Sark really trusts Quinn to do very much because it's so much RPO. There's so many quick screens, swing screens. I don't know that Quinn's really going to be able to show off the arm, and the accuracy downfield when he does get opportunities to take chances has just been so hit or miss. He's been very inaccurate, and that's a tough thing for a quarterback. You can't really be inaccurate and be successful. Quinn could have a huge 2024. I'm obviously hoping for it. Like, oh my goodness. I hope he dominates in 2024, obviously. But will he? That's a big question right now when we're talking about who goes in the first round of the 2025 NFL draft a year out. Quinn's got big time potential. Could go way higher than this. Could go way lower than this. QB is a really tough position this year. But one thing I know from rewatching my 2024 way too early mock draft, quarterbacks go high. Even in a bad quarterback class, teams will convince themselves that these guys are franchise difference makers, and they could be. They could be. So we'll see what ends up happening. But Quinn is a huge wild card for me, as are a lot of these QBs, right? But QBs go earlier than this. Rams at 15. I'm going Ernest Green. Tackle for Georgia, was a freshman All-American. A big reason why Amarius Mims was stuck playing right tackle because Ernest Green was so good over on that other side. We'll see what he looks like in 2024. Could end up being an easy first-round pick. Again, redshirt freshman ends up being a redshirt sophomore, which grants eligibility for those who don't know how that works. Of course, all you need is to be in college for 3 years. You do not need to play for 3 years. You don't need to be a true junior. Redshirt sophomore counts as well, which is what he's going to be. But I just figure the Rams could use a franchise left tackle. Tackle is a position that I thought they could consider upgrading in the first round of this past draft. They go defense. I think probably ends up being the right call, but you could definitely take a tackle or even a quarterback at this point next year. We'll see what the Rams end up looking like. And then at 16, I said I would talk about him more, and we're going to. Dayon Walker from Kentucky is a freak. I keep saying Dayon Walker because I'm thinking of Dayon Buchanan. I think it's actually Dion. You guys can correct me in the comment section below. When you're watching all 22, you don't have any type of commentary. And he was a guy that really, really pops. Obviously, when doing any type of draft prep and grinding through film, you're watching a lot of SEC football. He was a menace. And you think, 6'6", 350, oh, he's just a space-eating nose tackle. No, very much not. He could play 3-tech, and I'd be comfortable with it there. He is a freak athlete. Explosive, fast, strong as all hell, and obviously at 6'6", 350, he's incredibly difficult to move, but his upside as a pass rusher is legitimate. He is a really, really, really good player, and absolutely deserves first-round consideration, and for a team that needs to improve their defensive interior, Walker makes a ton of sense. He is a really fun player to watch. I recommend, I mean, even look up highlights or something. He is a monster. Browns at 17. Thought about this one for a while, and I did with a lot of these, of course, but this one in particular, I'm like, okay, which direction do the Browns actually choose to go in? And I think I'm going for T-Mac, Tetaroa McMillan from Arizona. He's got great size and ability after the catch, brother of Jalen McMillan, 6'5", 205. This Arizona team is fun. A bunch of really, really good players. And McMillan is somebody that I think will end up being a first-round pick. One of the first receivers, if not the first receiver off the board. I look at the Browns. I think they could afford to invest in the position. Not a guarantee. I know you trade for Jerry Jeudy and extend him, but Amari Cooper's not locked down long-term. Neither is Elijah Moore. How do you feel about Cedric Tillman for the future? T-Mac ends up being an option there for the Browns at 17. Bears at 18. Another one that, I'm up in the air about. Do they go with the true edge? Do they invest in the offensive line, depending on how 2024 looks? I think the offensive line is going to be pretty good. I think they got to go defense here. So you really think about guys in the front seven. And instead of going with a true edge, I decided go with the electric athletic ability and explosiveness of Harold Perkins from LSU. He is not a true edge rusher. He is best off the ball, but is an incredible blitzer and is certainly athletic enough in space and good enough in coverage that I think he's going to end up evolving even more as a player and end up kind of regaining some real true top 10 hype. I think when you talk about him playing off the ball and also blitzing consistently, that's what his best role in the NFL is going to be, is taking advantage of overall athleticism. He is a tremendously fun player to watch. I struggle with the NFL evaluation. Is he a bit of a tweener? What is his true role end up, being? Is he a will? I think probably in the NFL. And I look at the Bears, and it isn't necessarily the biggest need to get another linebacker in the mix. But when you add his value as a blitzer, I think a defensive coordinator is going to really love having him on their team. He ends up being the pick there for me at number 18. Chargers at 19. This one should be pretty obvious because I'm going to go, straight chalk here. Jim Harbaugh, Michigan player. Well, Colston Loveland, I think, could absolutely be another first-round tight end. He's got size. He's got great speed. He's good after the catch. He's a willing blocker. And, of course, the Michigan connection with Jim Harbaugh is there. Does he end up going to the Chargers? Well, they really needed help at tight end. The Michigan connection's there. The talent is there. Colston Loveland is absolutely a first-round type player right now. See if that ends up being true this time, in the 2025 draft. But really, really talented player with, again, NFL size and athletic ability. This feels like the range for the first tight end off the board as well with the Jim Harbaugh connection. It was just way too easy of a pick there for me. At number 20, I think the Texans could certainly look to go with an outside corner, and Takario Davis is certainly an option, but I think Denzel Burke could go ahead of him. Denzel Burke was in play to be a top, 50 or first round pick even if he declared for the 2024 NFL draft, ends up going back to Ohio State. If he has a really good season for Ohio State in 2024, I think he ends up being a first round pick with clear boundary type size at 6'1", 190. That's really a position of need for the Texans if you look at what they got going on. Derek Stingley's a great player. Is Jeff Okudah going to be a big-time player for them and someone that gets re-signed long-term? We don't know. Denzel Burke ends up making a bit of sense there. Thought about Malachi Starks because he's so good. Thought about Takario Davis because the potential is great, but ended up settling on Burke, who's just a really solid player. At number 21, the Jets could absolutely consider quarterback here. No telling what they're going to look like with Aaron Rodgers in 2025 because he might not even be there, right? I don't know what's going to happen there. Absolutely could be a QB. I could see this being Riley Leonard very easily, right? Or even, Drew Aller, somebody with potential. I could see it, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with Rodgers. I could take a QB just because, like I did with Ewers, when we don't know if, Russell Wilson or Justin Fields will be there. But I'm going to go Malachi Starks. I think I just have a feeling that Rodgers will sign another one-year deal or something if, 2024 goes well. I can't guarantee it. I don't know. So it could be a QB easily, but I'm trying to find a spot for Malachi Starks because I think right now, another player that really popped when you're watching Georgia. I think right now he could end up being a top 10 player in this class, the way I see it. Just, in my head, big board, he's such a talented player. He can come down and hit. He's got speed to play over the top. Ideal size as well at 6'1", 205. Where does he end up going, though? When does the first safety go off the board? That's the difficult thing to predict and project right now as we get to the Falcons at 22. This one is another interesting one. I had it penciled in as a Emeka Egbuka. Again, could have been a first-round pick. Maybe a slot receiver in the NFL. In fact, probably a slot receiver. But solid enough athletically, solid route runner, solid hands. He's just solid everything. He's so good at everything, right? Could end up being a first-round pick for sure. But in the end, I decided on Nick Scorton from Purdue. Used to be known as Nick Carraway. Led the Big Ten in sacks last year at Purdue. Transferred to Texas A&M, so he's going to be playing at Texas A&M in 2024. And this is an interesting one because he's got clear NFL-type size and athleticism, 6'4", 260. He was listed on the Purdue website at 280. And again, led the Big Ten in sacks, extremely productive, and could have a huge season now moving to the SEC with Texas A&M. Somebody to watch out for, and of course, the Falcons could absolutely invest a high pick in an edge rusher, and a high pick we'll call 22. Dolphins at 23, I really considered getting another interior defensive lineman off the board here. But for the Dolphins, I ended up going with interior offensive lineman Tyler Booker from Alabama. There's, another good guard is Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. I think he ends up coming out. I think he was draft eligible in 2024 as well. But not available here in the PFF pool. Former really highly ranked recruit, but not available. So end up going Tyler Booker, who I think could also end up getting in the first round. It is difficult for interior offensive linemen to be drafted in the first round. I think Booker has a chance. And then Packers at 24. I look at their interior defensive line. I think Kenneth Grant from Michigan makes a ton of sense. 6'3", 340, another guy that really played super well for the Michigan Wolverines defensive line in 2023. I look at the Packers D-line, and I think it could certainly not only be upgraded on the interior, but you might need to plan for a life without Kenny Clark. Get Kenneth Grant in the mix. Cowboys at 25. I'll tell you, I really considered quarterback for a long time here. It sounds so weird because Dak Prescott's been a Cowboy for so long now. 2026 draft has played well, even though, of course, hasn't come up clutch in the playoffs, thankfully. But there's no telling if he's going to be a Cowboy in 2025. Seems like the two sides are pretty far apart on an extension. This could be a quarterback. Again, just like we talked about with the Jets, I'm not convinced that it will be. I don't know what those two teams are going to do at QB, but we're going to just pencil in Emeka Egbuka. I think Dak, how does he not end up coming to a new deal with the Cowboys? It just feels so weird. So I'm going to go Emeka Egbuka, assuming that Dak Prescott ends up re-signing with Dallas or gets franchise tagged or something. Emeka Egbuka is a weapon and an especially good addition to the slot. Eagles at 26, a bunch of really good players on the board, but just judging how Howie Roseman typically drafts here, I think it's going to be tough to ignore an offensive lineman 2 years in a row. Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon had a really nice 2023, is certainly on the rise as a prospect, and at 6'4", 305, has great overall size to tackle. Not super elite or anything, but starting tackle type size. And I'm planning for a life after Lane Johnson. I think that could absolutely be a possibility there for the Eagles in the back end of the first round. A bunch of other good players could be the selection, no question, but I think they do end up going with the tackle. Lions at 27. Getting my Texas bias out there. Not enough Texas players in the first round. I'm going Isaiah Bond. Wide receiver from Texas, of course. Hook'em, transferred to Texas. I think he's going to have a huge 2024 as the presumable wide receiver one for the Longhorns in 2024. I think he's going to end up being productive, but is extremely athletic. Had a great season for Alabama in 2023. Big time speed, and I think adding him to that Lions receiver room could be really fun with him. Maybe Jamison Williams on the outside, and of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot. They could use another receiver in the mix. Very clearly, Bond would give you a ton of speed, and then how would teams match up with him and Jamison Williams in that mix? It would create even more space for Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown underneath and over the middle. So I think that's a fun selection there for the Lions. And I think another name to watch is going to be Matthew Golden. Not going back-to-back here, but Matthew Golden from Texas. I don't know where he's going to end up going in the draft, but another really, really good athlete. Great after the catch. Great return man. Could be good value for a team drafting, of course. Hookem, transfer from Houston. We'll see what his 2024 looks like. I have big expectations for him, really. But PFF doesn't agree. Doesn't even have him as a draftable player right now. It is what it is. Can't please everybody. Bengals at 28. This was a tough one. And it's going to end up looking like a vanity pick, but you got to remember, this class is significantly better at the position than it was in 2023. We do see running backs go in the first round. No more Joe Mixon. Of course, you know, you have Zach Moss in there. I don't think that necessarily stops you from taking a player like Quinshawn Judkins in the first round. Transfer to Ohio State. I think he is the best back in the class. Ollie Gordon's my number 2. Genty from Boise State's probably my number 3. And then you start to talk about, you know, Trevion Henderson and Donovan Edwards. ETN transferred to Georgia. It'll be interesting. Damian Martinez transferred to Miami. That could be a really, really fun player to watch. Omarion Hampton had a great year from UNC this past year. Some names to watch at running back. Ashton Genty is one that I like quite a lot. So we'll see where he ends up going. But we could see a running back or 2, maybe even 3, go in the first round. But I'd put the number maybe at 1.5 or the over-under if I was a betting man, which you can be with code Bengal on Underdog Fantasy. First time deposit match up to $100. Bills at 29. Gonna go Jack Sawyer. Investing in the trenches. The Bills really could go so many different directions here. It could be corner, could be safety, could be edge, could be interior defensive line, could do something on the O-line, could be a receiver. I mean, the Bills, it's really wide open for them in my opinion. Jack Sawyer ends up being the pick. Ravens at 30. I'm going to go with JT Tuimoloau. Edge setting, edge player. I think, you know, he's a power rush player, but it's just your typical 3-down defensive lineman. And it's good value there for the Ravens at 30 that I thought really could have taken an edge rusher, you know, high in the 2024 draft. Opt not to do that. Tuimoloau makes sense there at 30 for me. And then we have the 49ers and Chiefs to wrap things up. I didn't set the draft order. I should have said that at the start, but whatever. No way this team's going to be at number 3. I don't care. It is what it is. It's a year out. At number 31, we have the 49ers. I'm going to go to Takario Davis. Has the size that the 49ers love at the position. Obvious athletic upside there as well. Really, really fun player. He could potentially transfer out of Arizona. We'll see if he's playing football at Arizona in 2024. I think he will. We'll have to see what happens. Texas has been a rumor. That'd be sick. And then the Chiefs to wrap up this first round. I'm going to go Landon Jackson. Think he's going to end up being a big riser. Patrick Payton could be as well, to be honest. Jamar Turner's kind of like an inside-outside type guy. Probably a defensive tackle at the next level. Another like highly touted recruit for A&M. And Landon Jackson, really good athlete. He's 6'7", 280, big-time size, big-time athleticism, and big-time upside. And I look at the size profile. It seems like a prototypical Steve Spagnuolo edge player. So Landon Jackson ends up finishing the first round for me. Really good player. I don't know that the Chiefs necessarily will take another edge, but I think there's a chance that, you know, George Karlaftis is not there long-term. That's a possibility, obviously. We don't really know what to expect from Felix Onyeudike-Uzama. Getting another edge in the mix is definitely a possibility. Could be a tackle, could be a receiver, could be a corner, but I'm going Landon Jackson to get his name in the first round. Remember, it's more about kind of being a big board more than just a mock draft, but of course, you know, the team fits are obviously weighted as well. But that is my way too early 2025 mock draft. We'll see how this ages in a year. Make sure to come back. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.